I call Brett Hudson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It is indeed a pleasure to rise and speak on this Passport Amendment Bill number 2. It's almost like being at an evangelist's review or reunion here. Such is the enthusiasm across both sides of the House for this bill and what it will do. I was actually a bit slow to rise because I was hoping the member opposite was going to carry on for a bit longer with such impassioned speaking on behalf of this bill. He did. I must note, though, Mr Speaker, he did make a point that my colleague who spoke before him had made perhaps the wrong judgment on just how important this bill is. But I will, to help Mr Cunliffe, for a man who, after all, has spent a rather large chunk of his life in this place, just to point out to him that even when you've served the amount of time that he has in this House, you can still get a little bit of understanding of legislation and change incorrect. So, Mr Cunliffe, when the refugees arrive in New Zealand, they will not be handed 10-year passports, but what they will get under this bill, under this amendment, is refugee travel documents that will have a validity period for moving from 2 years to 5 years, because that aligns to the residency requirement in order for them to apply and receive New Zealand citizenship. So I'll just help Mr Cunliffe to understand the bill a little better by pointing that out. Because the fundamental part of this amendment, the one that is captured, if we can use that term, captured the public's imagination, it certainly has got broad support outside of this House, I would wager, as well as inside, is the return to a 10-year validity period. It is a wonderful thing to be here and to be part of a united House, in this case, united Parliament, making a change, sir, that the public are very, very pleased to see. And no more did we say that, in fact, in the submissions that we received. And in fact, the Select Committee Chair made an interesting observation. The Honourable Ruth Dyson pointed out that the Kiwis have this thing, that when they broadly agree with a change or a bill going into Select Committee, they don't make submissions. And when they do make submissions that are in favour, they don't actually want to appear to talk to the submission in favour. And such was the case here. I think we received around 20 submissions and no one, not a single submitter, they were all basically in favour, and not a single submitter actually wanted to appear in front of the Select Committee to argue strongly in favour. So we can actually bear that in mind, Mr Speaker, the next time the opposition start talking to us about the number of submissions that are opposed to a government measure, that in their own words, the many in favour just don't bother submitting. So I'll keep that one filed away. But it is very, very good indeed to be a part of making something that the public very much want and very much support. I'll just cover a couple of other things this bill will do, because I think that they are as important, perhaps not as important in the minds of the general public as their return to 10-year validity, but they are important. So, as well as increasing the validity of refugee travel documents to align to the New Zealand residency requirement period, it reduces actually the validity period of certificates of identity from 4 years down to a maximum of 2 years. And these are documents, sir, that are issued to non-New Zealand citizens that can't obtain travel documents from their own home country. There is some concern about some people that fall in this category because of the difficulty of establishing bona fides as to their identities and their validity. So it makes a sensible thing to cap the validity period for travel documents in that category, sir, and that's a good change the bill will make. But one thing it will do, particularly around that area of proof of identity and a certainty of bona fides, is we know that the New Zealand passport is one of the most desirable in the world. It is the 8th most desirable in the world, according to Art and Capital, who created a passport index, a passport power type ranking. We're ahead of Australia, and that will come as no surprise to anyone in this House. We are behind a few other countries, but we are well up with the very, very best. Of course, the flip side of that, if you've got a passport that is so desirable, is it makes it a very, very attractive target for those who would like to misuse it, to forge it or to misuse it inappropriately. So one of the changes this amendment bill will bring about is that it will allow an offence of false representation to be applied extraterritorially. So it seems, on the face of it, Mr. Speaker, an odd situation today exists that you commit a crime if you make a false representation as to identity within New Zealand, and seeking to obtain a New Zealand passport. But if you make that same false representation outside of New Zealand, the power isn't there to actually take a court proceeding against you, at least not under this Act, not under New Zealand jurisdiction. So I think that's a very, very sensible change to bring about in this passport. Now, when we had the first reading debate, Mr. Speaker, I gave my contribution, focused a great deal on why we had come to the position that is in fact the current state, that we have a 5-year validity. All of the security requirements, the heightened concerns around security around the world post September 11, 2001, some changes that US legislation had effectively enforced in order for us to maintain our visa-free waiver status. So there were very, very strong reasons why we had to and did create the first change to move to a 5-year validity. And the Select Committee, in fact the government, in putting the legislation forward, looked very closely at ensuring that we could move back to a 10-year period and have confidence in the security and the technology behind our passports to make sure that we wouldn't unduly compromise New Zealand or New Zealand's standing by introducing great risks by doubling the validity period. We heard a lot from the officials on this. It gave us on the Select Committee great confidence. I think the New Zealand public have confidence and they certainly want to return to a 10-year validity period. And I commend this bill, Mr. Speaker, to the House.
I